Hello. Awesome. Well, hopefully everyone has some sugar in their system so we can make it through the last sprint of the afternoon. As mentioned, I'm Stephanie Geno. I'm the CMO at Innovid. For those of you who don't know us, we are a technology partner that really works with brands to unify advertising delivery, personalization, and measurement. I'm super excited to be here for today's conversation. Not only is it nice to be in person in my home city, but this is a topic I'm extremely passionate about. So Majid, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we jump in, do you want to just share a little bit about your role, your background, and what your scope is at Hershey's?
Sure. So nice to see everyone here. Thank you for having me. My experience is quite diverse. So I actually started out at Procter & Gamble as a chemical engineer, moved up the ranks in essentially the insights department, did a lot of qualitative and quantitative research, then got into healthcare disruptive innovation at P&G. That organization at the time was called FutureWorks, but now I think it's called P&G Ventures. And then moved over into their brand and did brand marketing within laundry at P&G at the ABM and BM level. And then had a few stints in the startup world. So started a company focused on men's health and weight loss, which is very difficult. So don't recommend that. And then and worked in some other smaller companies and moved out to Colorado a couple of years ago and really wanted to gain more experience in food. And through that experience, actually at one point worked in CBD for one of the largest CBD companies here for a couple of years, and then moved over to Hershey as my first role in food. So it's been fascinating learning about the food industry and all the unique dynamics relative to the other categories I've been a part of, but hopefully I can share some good insights today.
Amazing. So let's go ahead and dive in. I know we've got a lot of CPG marketers in the room today, so it likely comes as no surprise that there have been some seismic shifts in terms of the overall snacking category. And I think that spans both preferences of tastes as well as shopping behaviors. And that's driven a lot of innovation in the marketplace. Can you talk a little bit about the trends that you're seeing and how that's shaped some of the innovations and the strategies that you guys are looking at for Hershey's?
Yeah, sure. So, and one thing I should have mentioned is, I lead innovation and marketing for One Brands is what we call it, and that was acquired by Hershey in 2019. And I came on about a year and a half ago. And so One Brands, I'm sure about some bars, but we have a protein bar has 20 grams of sugar. I'm sorry, 20 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar. Not 20 grams of sugar. That would be the opposite of what we were trying to do. And it's about 200 calories and wonderful flavors. And actually, one of the innovations that enabled One to be so successful was the birthday cake flavor around 2015. And so, coming on, this category of high protein snacks, for anyone that knows a bit about it, is incredibly disruptive and innovative right now with all sorts of different forms and flavors and channels that are coming into play. I mean, dollars now picking up high protein bars. And so, we're seeing it's a lot of fun to work in, but incredibly competitive. I'd say two categories that are really difficult to do marketing in right now are snack bars and CBD. I mean, there's just so many brands out there, and the barrier of entry into those two are quite low. So you've got to be on your A game in marketing for those two. But yeah, plenty of opportunity from an innovation standpoint for what we're seeing in high protein snacks. We're seeing, chips and cookies and peanut butter cups, et cetera, come into play. And so a lot to be had there.
Yeah, so you hit on some of the changes in terms of consumer preference. I think one of the challenges that we've seen coming out of the last 2.5 years of people being at home is that there's been a decrease in brand loyalty, right? We're seeing that preference is eroding. People are opening themselves up to different brands and categories. And so a lot of marketers are now trying to determine, how do I reestablish those connections with my consumers? Can you talk a little bit about how you're approaching that at Hershey's? What are some strategies that you've used to re-engage people that maybe explored other brands over the last few years?
Sure. Well, when COVID occurred, and it's great to see folks again and not see so many masks, and so that's wonderful. Our category took a huge hit. People, use snack bars for commuting, for traveling, for going to the gym, and so our business was certainly impacted by it. But we shifted investments. So there's much larger investments into e-commerce, into Amazon, decreased investments in sampling. But as, things have opened up, our channel mix has dramatically shifted to where we're going back to things that we know have worked for us in the past because we do have a superior product from a taste and texture standpoint. And so going back to sampling in the right places, investing in programmatic targeting that's more efficient for us, and making sure that we are offering up different messages for different micro targets depending on who's in the marketplace. So.
Amazing. I want to dive in on a lot of the things that you just hit on. Now, this is the Inclusivity Summit, so I'd love to start with just reach, right? There's a lot of different audiences. I think if you have a mouth, you like to snack, right? So how do you go about reaching and targeting diverse audiences? And can you explain some of the nuances in your strategy and thinking there?
Yeah. So obviously it starts with data. What's great about Hershey is there's more data than you could ever be able to consume and appreciate and internalize. And historically in the high protein snack bar category, so we're talking pure protein and Quest and Think, years ago, it very much was focused on the male demographic, likely going into the gym, weightlifting quite a bit. But when we looked at the data, that's not who's buying the category. 3/4 of our shoppers are female, and of our lead competitors are female. And a majority of them are shopping at Walmart and Target, and they're not extreme fitness enthusiasts. These are shoppers that are just mindful about their health and want to live healthier, but don't want to give up indulgent flavors. And so, understanding that, it certainly was eye-opening for us, and we shifted our targeting, we shifted our messaging and our creative, which you can find on YouTube. And so, very much trying to be more relevant to your everyday consumer who cares about their health, but is not going in doing deadlifts a few times a week. So.
Amazing. I have not done a deadlift in a very long time. So you talked a little bit about media mix and how it's shifting. What are you seeing in terms of strategies, channels that are performing for you well in this moment in time versus maybe in the past weren't as influential a part of your mix?
A great question. So, having worked in many different industries and companies and sizes and so forth, what's interesting, one of the interesting things about marketing is that we're very much, as marketers, very much biased by our experiences and the companies that we've come from. And we think that those tactics and channels will work across, the industries and companies and so forth, and they don't. I just heard a story the other day of, someone coming from finance working at Dish and brought, the very high up in marketing brought, mailer marketing tactics over there, and that was their thing. And I think that, for us in our category, we have seen success. Now we're a $100 million brand in one brands. I've managed $1 billion brand. $1 billion brand has a very different set of tactics that they need to focus on because they have much higher household penetration, and that changes things. Our household penetration for high protein snacks is about 17%. So targeting is incredibly important for us, especially since we have different benefits for different people, whether it's satiety, weight loss, convenience, what have you. And so because targeting becomes incredibly important, first party data becomes also critical, and that's where programmatic becomes really important for us right now. And we're seeing that I've read in P&G's investing more in programmatic than they are in paid social and so forth at this point. So, we want tactics that enable great targeting. We are not going to do, broad sampling at Kroger or Walmart or Costco. We're going to do sampling at the right places that are relevant for our target. And then the influencer component. Influencers are incredibly important for our category. And it's funny because we would talk to the mothership of Hershey, and they say, "Oh, you guys don't need to invest so much in influencer. You don't need to do so much sampling." But they're different, right? Their household penetration is in the 98%, whereas for our brand, it's 5%. And so figuring out that right tactic, investing appropriately to it, and being open-minded and trying things, I think that's critical in marketing, which we don't do enough of.
Yeah, Absolutely. I mean, piggybacking off of the comment you made about programmatic, I think in large, we're seeing more and more brands leading into data-driven media, targeted media. But there's a challenge when you think about that through the lens of diversity and the inherent bias in media targeting. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen there and maybe some strategies that you've deployed to overcome that?
Yeah, great question. So this brand was built off of the mom and pop shops of Los Angeles and South Beach and New York City, with some grassroots, selling that occurred back then, and really fun people that did a great job to build it up and make it a trend. And now it's in Walmart. And as the category has grown tremendously over the years, this category really has become successful because people are realizing that it's a category that's relevant for weight management. And that's why Walmart cares a lot about it, and Target and other major retailers. And so, as we looked at the data and the category has changed, the data is telling us that actually, states like, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, Illinois, these are areas that are over indexing in the category relative to the population. And so just being data driven and asking those questions, the right questions, and double clicking into that, and then, adjusting the targeting accordingly has been helpful for us. So.
Amazing. So you talked about some strategies that are working really well. I'm going to flip that question on its head. Where are you seeing a drop off? Where are you seeing challenges where maybe some channels you've used in the past are not working as hard for you as they have?
Well, I love Amazon. I buy a lot of things from Amazon, so I'm not.
Same.
I don't want to come off as a hater, but our categories were very much shifted with COVID right now, and so we're going where consumers are going, and they're shifting away from Amazon for our category, which is because they're back in stores and seeing fun products and getting better deals and so forth. And so, we're going to continue to just follow the consumer on that front. I'd say that's probably the biggest shift right now.
Yeah, where do you think the shift is going towards?
That's a great question. Where is it going towards? The thing about, so I was talking to someone that works at CSU last night at a wonderful dinner that Laston hosted. So what's interesting about business and about marketing is that if you do what your competition does, you're not going to win. And so, I was having this conversation. So apparently advertising on Facebook wasn't really taught in business schools until about 2010. And Facebook was really started to catch on in 2004. So if you were on to Facebook by 2007, you were ahead of your competition. And so I think, and we were having a debate a year or so ago about TikTok and whether we should be on TikTok. And there were more people that thought we should not be on TikTok at the time. And now here we are where, things have changed.
Exactly.
So I think having the mindset of okay, how can we be different? What's going to catch on? Now, don't get me wrong. There are more times than not that there are gimmicky sort of marketing opportunities that really don't move the needle. That happens a lot. And so I think through experience, you sort of try to identify that. But when there's tremendous engagement in platforms, you have to, figure that out. And the influencer part, actually, I think is actually an area that will not go away in terms of partnering with influencers to drive engagement. The problem is that there are a lot of vendors and companies out there that have an influencer product, but they, traditionally will just, do paid advertising, what have you. And so you got to find a right vendor that understands it. And then ideally, if you have a DTC site, then can use the right platform that really allows you to partner with the right micro influencers. And that's where, in the last couple of years, figuring out influencers has been the difference between winning and losing for, both in the CBD category and also in high protein snack bars. So, and I see that's going to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really comes down to your point about how do you drive engagement. It's not just reaching audiences, it's connecting with them. And going back to our topic, it's about connecting with them authentically. So would love to talk about how do you approach that, right? You have a brand that has a personality and you are trying to reach various audiences that culturally are very different. So how do you find the right balance and the right blend between being authentic to your brand and speaking to people in a relevant way?
Yeah, that's also been very interesting for me. So coming from some great mentors at Procter and Gamble, I was lucky to be around the right people at the right time. We learned that insights are really what can drive tremendous marketing. And to get good insights, which what a good insight is, it's an unobvious truth that gives someone goosebumps when you say it. The problem with a lot of insights these days is that they're pretty obvious. They're not real insights. They're like facts. And to get good insights, it's gonna. I've heard it today. It's gonna take a lot of qualitative research. There's too much quantitative research that's done that the qualitative doesn't happen prior to the quantitative, so that we ask the right questions in the quantitative. And even if the qualitative is done, it's typically done in a focus group format, which people don't like to really share their true feelings with a bunch of strangers sitting around them. So you really have to do one-on-ones, and they typically have to take about an hour to 3 hours, depending on what you're doing. And if you hire a vendor to do it, they probably don't have a lot of experience in the category, so they're not going to ask those deep questions. And so you need someone in the organization who understands the consumer, the category, who can ask the right questions. And then once you get that, that becomes the kernel that can be a brilliant marketing campaign. But that's a lot of work. That's the problem. That's a lot of work. And if you do the work, it pays out. If you don't, it doesn't. And that's how we came up with the No Chalk campaign. So we have a campaign focused on superior taste, which is what the brand was built off of. Before I came, we talked about taste one to believe one was a campaign, which is okay, but it's a bit generic. Who doesn't like good taste? I mean, we all do. That's not an insight. But as we talk to our consumers, we realize that the chalky texture is a huge barrier, and we wanted to bring that to life. And so that was the kernel that manifests itself into a campaign. So.
Yeah, and it's a great example of bringing more inclusive talent and diversity into the content that you're putting out there in the market. I want to pivot a little bit, because when we think about the topic of representation, we're talking about the content, the creative we put in market, but oftentimes representation internally is so important to how that manifests in your company's culture and in overall marketplace visibility and presence. Now, I know Hershey's was just named 6th in Diversity Inc.'s top inclusive businesses. So that's a huge testament to a lot of the work that you guys have done. It's a kudos to you and your team. I'd love to understand, just from an overarching business perspective, how is that emphasis and that focus on driving diversity and inclusivity internally help drive business outcomes for the company?
Yeah, great question. So Hershey has a project, a Pathways project underway, where they want to, I think by 2025, have 50% of the workforce be female, 40% be people of color, and they're almost there with female. I mean, our CEO is, she's female, Michelle Buck. She's wonderful, and so we definitely have work to do. And spending a decade in Cincinnati, Ohio at Procter and Gamble, wonderful city, wonderful company, of course, but it creates its challenges in being in Cincinnati. And Hershey's in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Someone just told me this the other day. I don't know if it's true, but apparently the way that Milton Hershey picked that area was he was driving until he couldn't pick up any more radio airwaves. So they were out in the boondocks over there. So not the the most attractive place to live, from what I understand. And so I think the remote work movement is certainly helping with that in terms of bringing the best talent and diversity and so forth. But we have a long way to go. We certainly are seeing opportunities from a retention standpoint. But from my experience over time, what I've noticed is that, and we know diversity brings different points of views. We know that, and we know that from a regional standpoint, education standpoint, age standpoint. That's for sure. The other thing that I've noticed is with diversity also brings more objectivity into the decision-making process. For whatever reason, we could debate about what that is, what was driving that, but objectivity is a great way to insulate yourself from groupthink. And if that's going to enable better decision making, then I think that's what's best for the business. So.
Amazing. I want to click in on something that you mentioned earlier when you were talking about how you go about reaching diverse audiences. And again, it comes back to that concept of authenticity, and customizing messaging based on where the consumer is or who the consumer is. Can you talk a little bit about some strategies and how you're thinking about changing the message based on the who and the where?
Sure. The representative from Google this morning mentioned about more data being captured from companies to allow for first party targeting and so forth. So that's certainly a movement within Hershey and other major companies I've been a part of. And so, but that first party data then allows for micro targeting of different benefits. That it's in our category of high protein snacks. There are very different reasons why people buy our products, and I do see opportunities for more meaningful claims that are relevant and statistically significant from a purchase intent standpoint than what I've seen, what I've historically seen in food. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. The problem with that is that there's a tremendously, I think, diverse, reason behind why people buy these different food products for whatever reason, and that makes the marketing more difficult. And so, if you can figure out the top 3 to 5 reasons why people buy your products. In our case, it's about high protein for fitness, or it's about weight loss, or it's about convenience. Those are very different messages. And so if we can get better data that allows us to put that right message in front of the right person, that is huge for conversion. So we've got a long way to go on that front, but that's the focus.
Amazing. I know this is a pretty engaged crowd. We're coming to the end of our time, so we'll open it up and see if there's any questions from the audience. Okay. Okay. I can keep going.
Thank you. Thank you both for such an inspiring and insightful session. So what are the tools that you're giving to your team to think about inclusive audiences and just be closer to culture in general and closer to your consumers, of course?
Yeah, great question. One thing I was going to mention that I don't know if it's normal yet or most companies do it, but one of the things that came out of COVID is that it feels like everyone knows how to use Zoom now, which is great, because what that enables is for us to get closer to our consumer and do research for a fraction of what it would have cost. I mean, historically, if we wanted to talk to 15 people that were screened properly, we're looking at $10,000 to $15,000 at least. We have to use a venue and so forth for that. That's all gone out the window. We've got a nice email database of thousands of people, and we can, filter for the people that we want to speak with that are interested in certain things, and have a Zoom conversation. And we don't have to worry about, can they figure out Zoom and so forth. And so that's been wonderful for us. I think that there's been, at least for our $100 million brand, there's been an oversensitivity to making sure that we're screening for the right people in research, and that's certainly a risk. But generally, I found that if you talk to 10 people, you're going to get tremendous insights that will allow for better quantitative research to drive action for the company. And then there's always a risk of, what if it's 10 people that are extreme in their thinking and so forth? But you can usually sense that in the conversations and then discard that and move on to the next consumer. So, but that's one of the things that we've done that's been tremendously helpful for us. And so we see, we've got wonderful products that 2 weeks ago, we just launched a Rice Krispie like texture in our products that's at Walmart called Crunch. And a lot of that has come from the research that we did with some folks here that helped us figure all that out. And so have high expectations for that and some other great innovation coming out in December and so forth. So it all starts with talking to consumers.
Thank you. And I think I have one more question, if that's okay. Is there any other questions in the audience?
I got one,
okay.
2 back here.
You know what? I will pass it on then.
This is on. Oh, you had talked about different tactics depending on household penetration of the brand. I'm just curious. We have brands at Danone with household segments, even with household penetration under 10%. What have you seen as effective tactics to grow household penetration?
Great question. I think I haven't seen a good flow chart or format of like what tactics make sense across size of brands. And I think that certainly needs to be done. Maybe Laston's class can produce that. So the traditional forms of marketing for small brands doesn't seem to work. And what I mean by that is like OTT, just, broader, paid social or video for the most part. Doesn't seem to work as well as it does for bigger brands. And I think a lot of it has to do with recall. And because it's a new brand, it's just much harder to drive recall. And as a result, that then comes down to, the best form of marketing is word of mouth. That's proven time and time again. Well, the closest iteration of word of mouth is influencer marketing. The problem with influencer marketing is that it becomes too costly more times than not. And so figuring out a way to do influencer so that it becomes efficient, I think has shown more success than in times that I've seen than not. So I would start there. What's great about food, or maybe not good depending on what seat you sit in, but what's great about being in food CPG versus non-food CPG is that if you've got a great product in food CPG, once you drive trial, the rest is history. Protein bars don't taste good for the most part. So if anyone could create a protein bar that tastes like, a Milky Way or Snickers bar, that's affordable, then they're going to do incredibly well. And so, if you can figure out the right marketing mix in food, then, you're pretty good. Non-food CPG is a totally different story. And so, I won't get into all that, but yeah, I think, and the key is testing. Whether it's sampling, influencer, or, what other tactics may be at bay, but those are the ones that I would start with.
Amazing. Do we have time for one more?
I think
No? Okay. That is time. So Majid, thank you so much
Sure,
for the
thank you.
insight and the perspective. Thank you.